Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome along to this delayed meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee because of the papers for scrutiny and performance earlier. It's not been quite as delayed as was the case on 22nd of November. I think there's a reasonable chance that we will get through all of the items on the agenda today. What I am going to ask is, before we move on to the minutes and so on and so forth, what I do want to point out, well, I think we'll take welcome apologies first. Apologies. So are there any apologies?
Thanks, Convener. We don't have any formal apologies this afternoon, but we do have 2 members joining us online. So when I call out your name, could you please confirm you're present? Councillor Drysdale.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you. And Provost McDade.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm here as well.
Thank you. All members are present, Convener.
Thank you, Kirsten. Next, do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, there being none, we'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting. But what I do want to state is this. The first substantive item on the agenda today is the procurement update. We'll then take revenue and the capital budget. However, from what I understand, both Pauline Johnson and Claire Mailer have to be away early for a particular meeting. So I'm going to take, with agreement of the committee, the paper on flexible working earlier and indeed after the paper on procurement. Do we have agreement on that? Thank you. Okay, we now have the minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of November. Is there anything people want to raise, either in terms of, got cycled, in terms of the factual content or of matters arising? Right, the minutes are agreed. Item 4, outstanding business statement, and as you can see, there are there 4 items. Does anyone want to raise anything in relation to the outstanding business statement? No? Okay. Right, we're now then going to move on to the first substantive paper today, and this is the paper on procurement. This is the paper plus its appendices that we were going to look at on 22nd of November. It just wasn't possible at the time. And we also have present not just Lisa Simpson, who's going to introduce the paper, but also 2 of the key officers in the procurement section, and that is Lindsay Stewart and Vanessa Robertson, and they're sitting, I think, over there. And they may yet come in to answer on certain questions. But first of all, I'm going to ask Lisa Simpson to introduce the paper. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Convener. And councillors, as this paper was bumped at the last meeting, it had to be taken today because obviously the annual report has to be signed off in the financial year. But I would like to add my apologies, as even in November it was coming slightly later than we would have hoped. So some of the information is of some vintage, so if you could bear that in mind when you're asking questions, but hopefully when you see what the forward plan is around procurement and commissioning, some of that will make more sense. As I said, the council has, and the other thing that I would say, Vanessa and Lindsay are in the room, and all of your hard questions will be directed to them because they're probably way better placed to answer them than I am. The council has a statutory duty to report retrospectively on its procurement activity in the previous financial year, and also to then set out its planned procurement for future years. The committee is being requested to approve the publication of our procurement annual report for the financial year 22-23, which is attached as Appendix 1, and note the record of tenders accepted under the Council's scheme of delegation at Appendix 2. And in addition to that, the committee is being asked to note the planned procurement activity, which was set out for the period 23-24, which of course we are now nearing the end of. In terms of the contract delivery plan and any payments made to external organisations during that financial year under the Council's reporting arrangements for following the public pound. So there's quite a number of documents that Council is being asked to consider and approve. Procurement is central to the delivery of Council services and includes revenue expenditure and capital investment in the Council's infrastructure and assets. In the period 22-23, 203 contracts were awarded with a spend in the region of £323 million. And the report sets out how the procurement function supports the delivery of sustainable outcomes and best value in respect of services to the communities of Perth and Kinross. Some of the key contracts awarded during the reporting period include the Cross Tay Link Road construction, a broad range of capital projects and programmes through Perth People Plan and Perth Transport Futures, housing stock improvements including housing term maintenance, environmental improvements and ceiling replacements, and a broad range of social care and support services to support the most vulnerable individuals within our communities. The Council's procurement activity is also very important to the local economy. During the reporting period, £76 million worth of Council spend was recorded as being with local suppliers. This was an increase of approximately £9 million on the previous year and is of course to be welcomed. The annual update relates to the current strategy, and I would advise you that a final update on this strategy will be brought back to you in just a couple of months' time, 3 months' time, in June 2024. And at that same time, I will be presenting a new 5-year strategy, which has been aligned to our corporate plan objectives, and which will be a key element of our ongoing transformation and change programme in relation to strategic commissioning and procurement. The transformation programme is wide-ranging and ambitious, and it seeks to ensure that we drive the greatest value from our procurement functionality and get the best bang for the Perth and Kinross buck. There are a number of diverse project work streams and tests of change projects being undertaken over the period and of the strategy, and they will focus on, not exclusively, but growing the local market and community wealth building, sustainable procurement and the circular economy, data and procurement analytics to support financial planning and investment decision making, enhancing community benefits from existing contracts, and greater internal and external collaboration to achieve greater value for money. That is to name but a few. Elected members will be updated as to progress in terms of the change programme in due course, but in the meantime, I and my officers within the procurement team are here in attendance to answer any questions that you may have on the report before you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions? There are a fair few. I will call on Councillor Barrett first of all. Oh, I see. No. Councillor Rabbit. I see what's happening.
Thank you, Convener. I think I know the answer to this one. I think it's yes, but in terms of procuring locally, because it's a good news story, and actually the paper's really good as well, I believe. But do we kind of proactively encourage local tendering where possible, and notwithstanding it has to be within the parameters of the policy? Thanks.
It really is about looking at the legislative framework more flexibly and seeing what we can do in terms of how we weight certain bits of the specification. But there is a lot of proactive work, and I think Lindsay and Vanessa would be best placed to actually tell you about some of the engagement that we do with potential suppliers.
Next is Deputy Provost. Sorry.
Yeah, so thank you. In terms of local suppliers, we are just in the process of planning for a Meet the Buyer event, which takes place in February across Tayside. So we're actively promoting that at the moment to try and encourage local suppliers. We're also increasing and developing our relationship with the Chamber of Commerce to again encourage more local suppliers and working with them to see what is it that they actually need from us to assist them in the tendering process, because quite often the feedback is that they find it difficult and challenging because of the processes that they do need to go through to ensure that as a council our procurement processes are compliant with the regulations. In the last financial year as well, conscious the report relates to 22-23, but in 23-24, we have updated the council's contract rules to allow for quick quotes for works contracts to be used for the value of up to £250,000. So by using the quick quote, what that means is that we are actually selecting the suppliers that are invited to quote. So that allows us to target local suppliers specifically for those projects. We're monitoring that on a monthly basis to see what difference that has made, and potentially we have the scope under the regulations to increase that threshold further if we identify that it has made an improvement to the local suppliers. Thank you. Have you got anything else to add, Vanessa?
I suppose the only thing I would add as well is, again, it won't affect 2023-24 yet because we're only starting doing it, but we are going to start putting into documents in terms of main contractors reporting subcontracting spend to us, because we're aware that we've got some really big projects on at the moment, like the Crossdale Link Road, and a lot of their subcontractor spend will be local. So we would like to be able to report on that.
Lindsay, Vanessa, thank you.
Just very briefly,
Yeah.
I feel very discourteous because I can't see you because of the pillar, but thanks very much for that real encouraging answer. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, next is Deputy Provost Parrott. Andrew.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm on page 56 of our papers, page 42 of the report. I'm fascinated to see that the amounts are only small, but can I ask what services is it that we're buying from the Scottish Police Authority? Obviously in different areas because they're under CDS communities and the Health and Social Care Partnership. But I'd be interested in what services are we buying from the police, and why is it right to include them under the ALIOs there? I'm curious. Thanks.
Who first?
Yeah, so with following the
Vanessa.
public pound report, we can take questions back, but I don't have the information. We pull the report together, but we would need to go back to the services to find out what the contracting arrangement is. So we can do that and come back to you if that's okay. Is that all right?
Thank you very much. I'd be interested to know. Thanks.
Okay, I'm sure that can be done. Thanks, Vanessa. Next is Councillor Duff. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. My question's on page, sorry, I've just shifted my mouse there. On page 20, and it's in connection with the diagram there, which shows the percentage of business with small and medium-sized enterprises. I welcome the increase in the £9 million in terms of the spend with local suppliers. And while we continue to do just over 80% of our procurement business with SMEs, it looks as if there's been a significant fall in our usage of Scottish SMEs, where the numbers have fallen from 78% last year down to 64% this year. And I wondered if there was a reason why we appear to have shifted a considerable portion of our spend to small and medium enterprises elsewhere than in Scotland. Thank you.
So,
In terms of the procurement framework, we can't simply just pick which SMEs that we engage with. We have to go through the process. So a lot of that will depend on who's actually submitting bids for that type of work. And once they're in, whoever they are from, they have to be processed and evaluated in accordance with the structure. There's not been any sort of conscious policy decision. It simply has been that's just at the position of fact. But I think the important thing is that what we are looking to do as part of the wider transformation and change programme is look at where there are greater opportunities to actually maximise and increase local supplier spend.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to move on now to Bailey, Ulster. Bailey, Ulster.
Thank you very much, convener. I'm looking at page 33 of the document packets where we have the list of current things that we're buying. Under transparency notices, social care support has 3 lines with what I'd call quite chunky figures. They total £6 million almost over the period. Would I be right to understand that social care support is probably where we're buying in social care work from third-party providers? So this is essentially an outsourced labour cost of sorts. Thanks.
Lindsay.
Thank you. These contracts are where we are going out to the market and procuring. They may be care at home services. They may be services where there's care within a residential block. But the reason that they're listed like that is because we don't want to publicise any information that could indicate what individuals are living in those properties. So that's why we've not listed the detail of where the locations are.
Okay, you're quite happy with that, right, fine. Next to Councillor Cuthbert. I see that you've got 2 questions. I think just out of courtesy, unless they're connected, we'll take your first question, then Councillor Barrett, and then your second question. Thank
you, convener. Yeah, my first question is in the appendices, it mentions what's been procured, but it doesn't mention who's been awarded the contract. Is that because of legal reasons, or is it possible to actually identify where the contract's been awarded?
Lindsay.
We can provide that information. So all of the detail of which contracts have been awarded to which individual suppliers are publicly available on our contract register on Public Contract Scotland. So we can share a link to that register with the group. Thank you.
Will that suffice, or you want to follow up on that? Yeah.
Okay, just is it, I mean, would it really increase the length to do that on the actual report?
It would increase it significantly because some of these lines on the reports where they're a framework, they've been awarded to multiple suppliers. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cuthbert, I'll come back to you for your second question in a little while. Next is Councillor Barrett. Peter.
Thanks, convener. Page 26 of the report, there's a table of collaborative spends which come to about £65 million out of a total spend, we're told on page 3 of 323 million. So that would seem to indicate that only 20% of our procurement is through collaborative means, which seems or would appear to me to be quite small. And I just wonder, do we have any way of checking that we're maximising the use of collaborative spend arrangements to get the best value for the council, and what safeguards are there to ensure that people are using those collaborative mechanisms as a matter of routine? And do we know how that 20% compares to other local authorities? I notice on page 27 that there hasn't been any benchmarking activity since 2018.
Thank you. Lisa.
I think the first point to make is just a bit of clarification, because although that percentage might look small in comparison to the global figure, that global figure includes an awful lot of kind of fixed contract costs. So as well as big construction, it will also include, you know, our standard utilities that we are paying to you know, run our own properties. It will also include the schools contract, the ILL contract. So of that estate. So there's a big chunk of that that's fixed every day and is not necessarily reflective of all of that current spend that's going in that's actually influenceable. So if you looked at it over the influenceable spend, it's probably quite a bit higher than that percentage that you're coming to. We are looking to maximise internal and external collaborative arrangements. We previously operated under the Tayside Procurement Consortium, but that has now effectively been not so much disbanded, but brought in. The resources have been brought in-house, and the procurement is happening in each individual authority, with us still looking to see where we can have collaborative opportunities that we can. Our emphasis in the first instance, or in terms of the change programme, is to look at these opportunities for internal collaboration, because we've already identified a number of opportunities in that. And then once we've got that embedded, and we're looking to increase that, we will then be looking at external collaborative opportunities with other public partners and other authorities. So that's an area that's a specific project under the transformation programme. I don't know if Lindsay, do you have anything, or Vanessa, do you have anything else to add? I haven't missed anything.
The piece which is an annual assessment for procurement for the council as a whole, so it's not really benchmarking in terms of best value using collaborative frameworks. It covers a wide range such as leadership. I would say you probably do a bit of benchmarking every time you do a contract. So when we do a contract strategy, we do look at all the collaborative opportunities that are available, and we check to see where we think we would achieve best value for each contract before we go out to the market.
Okay. Move on to Billy Ahern.
Thank you very much. My question is with regards to the table on page 21 about the size of businesses. Notice the number of businesses with over 250 employees increased from 27 last year to 52 this year. So my question, if you know the answer, is have 25 new businesses with over 250 employees been established in Perth and Kinross since last year? Or is it that 25 of these businesses now registered with the Public Contract Scotland as a result of an awareness campaign?
Right, Lindsay?
Yeah, that's correct. It's that there has been an increase in the number of suppliers who have registered on Public Contract Scotland. We don't know if they are new businesses. Some of them will have registered because we've specifically targeted them through awareness that they have the ability to meet our requirements, and other ones will have registered through attendance at Meet the Buyer events or engagement through other means. Quite often we will get contacted by local suppliers asking how they can do business with the council, and one of the pieces of guidance that we give them is to register on public contracts as the first point of contact. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Right. From what I can see, I think this will be the last question. It's the second question from Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I think we're looking to set some fairly ambitious targets to save money on procurement and commissioning over the next 3 years. I was just wondering, how will that be achieved, and what sort of scale do you think is achievable?
Hazel.
In truthful, I don't know exactly how it will be achieved. That's why we've got a number of projects and work streams underway. We've got another number of small tests of change pilots underway to see where where are the opportunities. So at this stage, which is quite early in the programme, what we're looking to just see is where on earth there could be opportunities. What we're looking to target first is high area of spend. So we're working very closely with our internal stakeholders, our big spenders, to see whether or not we can drive more efficiencies and better value and savings from collaborative spend. So instead of property buying something that housing then need to buy in 6 months' time, can we try and align contracts and do a bulk contract? So at the moment, we're in the process of reviewing when contracts are naturally coming to an end, identifying areas where there are similar types of spend that we could perhaps look to pooling together in terms of getting them onto frameworks, bulk buying, that type of thing. So every opportunity is being looked at. And as we try small pilots, if they're not delivering the results, then we're moving very quickly on and looking for opportunities elsewhere. And I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that I can deliver some savings and I don't get sad. I don't get reprimanded.
I'm now going to move the report with no further questions from what I can see. First of all, Lisa, as the strategic lead for legal and governance, I think has provided us with an overview on the contents of the procurement annual report for 22-23. And as we said, it has been deferred. I'm also grateful to both Lindsay Stewart and Vanessa Robertson for their contributions today. They're key members of the procurement team. And I'm glad they got their chance to make a contribution, whereas the last meeting in November, they had to sit throughout the whole proceedings and then didn't get to say anything. The purpose of the report basically is twofold. First of all, it provides us with a look back at procurement activity during the last financial year, 22-23. Second, it provides an overview of non-procurement activity over the next few years. I want to draw the attention of the committee to a few key points from the report. Some of these have been commented on or raised already, but they do deserve particular comment. In the last reported financial year, 203 contracts were awarded. 52 businesses across Tayside were awarded new contracts. 47% of our spend was with SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses. And importantly, 76 million was spent locally, and that's an increase of just over 9 million on the previous reporting period. All full details of both the look back and the look forward are set out in the appendix, as you can see attached to the report. Following approval today, and it does need to be approved today, this information will be published, ensuring that we comply with our reporting and legislative requirements. The strategic lead, Lisa Simpson, also outlined elements of the strategic procurement and commissioning transformation programme, including the development of a new strategy, and that's going to be a 5-year strategy. I was especially pleased to hear that supporting local businesses and enhancing community benefits through our procurement activities will be a key strategic focus. Finally, I look forward to receiving the 23-24 procurement update, and that'll be the last update under the current strategy. And that comes in, I think it's the 12th of June this year, and also alongside that new 5-year strategy. It's going to be one of the key central elements of our transformation programme and as to what we can do on that front. But I now move on to any comments. Do we have any comments? Oh, yeah, I move the report. Can I ask you go into second? Yeah, sorry.
Thanks. I'd like to thank the officers responsible for bringing this report. I didn't realise how important procurement was till I met them last year, and how important that all our spend at this time has to be monitored and used to the best advantage of the businesses within Perthshire and surround it, and as I mentioned before, in Scotland as well across the UK. So we'll have to use the flexibility to keep our workforce to have more well-paid jobs. So thanks for bringing the report. I know it's historic, but I'm looking forward to June the 12th when we move forward and tackle the financial difficulties we have, because procurement is so important that everything that we spend goes through there. So we'll be watching you even more closely now. So thanks. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Right, in terms of comment, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. I too would also like to welcome the report, which is by and large a very good news story for Perth and Kinross, and to thank Lisa and her team for bringing the report to us today. It's particularly welcoming to see the £76 million spend on local suppliers, an increase of £9 million for local firms across P&K. I also welcome the increased interest in our community benefits scheme and the greater number of benefits which are being delivered. I think this is a great way for groups and organisations to get a little extra help with their projects, and hopefully will continue to increase awareness of the scheme. I'm also pleased to see the breadth and depth of the many awards which were made under our Community Investment Fund, which continues to be a very successful and very well received scheme in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Do we have any further comments? Okay, can we agree the report? Okay, we move on to next business, and we're taking it earlier in the agenda, and that is the report on flexible working framework. And I would call on Pauline Johnson to introduce the paper. Pauline.
Thank you. The Council's employment policies are designed to support the effective delivery of services to communities and also to the corporate plan priorities and objectives. We have current flexible working policies and provisions in place.
Slightly louder, not coming over too clearly.
You want me to start again? Okay. We have a number of current flexible working policies in place, and there's changes coming in respect of legislative changes across the UK. And that means that we're taking this opportunity to refresh our flexible working framework that will be the overarching framework for all existing flexible working arrangements that the Council operate to, and will endorse now flexible approach to hybrid work style. So we're introducing hybrid on a permanent basis moving forward. We've been trialling that for a number of years since the pandemic, and what we're asking is that that is now confirmed as a work style across the Council. The framework itself that's attached to Appendix 1 sets out our requirements in terms of how we will design our flexible working practices to ensure that we're an inclusive, diverse employer, that we provide fair and equality treatment to all employees, and that we actually consider what that means for our businesses, our partners, stakeholders, and other arrangements that we operate to in terms of our customer base across Perth and Kinross. The individuals and the employees who have been working to the flexible working arrangements since the pandemic are just over 1,000 employees. We've got over nearly 6,000 employees in the Council, and predominantly the majority of them have been at work or in a workplace since the pandemic. and therefore this work style is being made permanent for a small proportion of the council workforce who have been operating on a flexible basis since the pandemic. We're recommending that the framework is approved, that you note the changes to legislation that will be incorporated within it, and agree to note the arrangement from the 1st of April for hybrid working to be established with a normally minimum level of attendance of 2 days per week for those who are able to access hybrid working as a work style.
Okay, thank you. At the moment, we only have one question, and that's from Bailey Ulster Bailey. Bailey.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. I think it's right that we codify this new way of working so there are some defined parameters to make sure everyone's treated fairly. So that's great news. Thank you. In the report, paragraph 4.6 mentions rightly that trade unions have been consulted, but what it doesn't say is what the trade unions said. So my question is twofold. One is, when specifically were the trade unions consulted on the specifics of this report? And secondly, what was their response? Thank you.
Holly.
Throughout the arrangements that have been in place on a temporary basis, we've continued to engage with the trade unions on hybrid in relation to the guidance updates at the Employee Joint Consultative Committee that are set quarterly. In terms of this report, they were only consulted prior to Christmas, in the lead up to Christmas, and after when we drafted the report for committee. In terms of response, it's in relation to the flexible working framework itself, not necessarily about the hybrid work style, because that's been trailed for a number of years as we've been trialling it. So the framework itself was what we actually spoke to the trade unions. There was no objections or concerns, and we will continue to engage with them when we're actually developing guidance and the associated arrangements underneath the framework.
Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. My question is on page 134, and it's in relation to 5.5b. It talks about hybrid working arrangements and the normal workplace attendance of at least 2 days per week. Who is the final decision as to the number of days per week that this arrangement would be in place for?
It's based on business need, and therefore the individuals will need to consider with their line manager. So the line managers will ultimately determine what works in their area of business, what's appropriate in terms of the service that they're delivering, who they're engaging with, when they should engage with them, and where that should happen. And therefore ultimately it will be driven by business decisions linked to the work activity that managers are directly managing.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Illingworth.
Okay, thank you, Convener. And what's the difference between this scheme and the previous scheme?
Pauline.
The flexible working framework's the overarching principle that we've set out in terms of our policy about why we have as an employer flexible working in place. It's also there to balance individual needs and to create diversity, inclusion and equality of access to flexible arrangements. The hybrid itself is just to actually confirm that that's a hybrid work style, because before we only had home working or working in a workplace. We didn't have hybrid as a work style, and hybrid as a work style was introduced due to the pandemic. And this is just formalising that we're actually continuing with a hybrid work style going forward.
Thank you.
Right, I now move on to, if Councillor Illingworth's happy, to Councillor Drysdale, who's online. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I just had a question regarding hybrid working, and perhaps if Pauline could clarify for me, do members of staff who are working from home, do they effectively self-certify the hours that they work? How does it work? I'm just conscious that at a national level there is a desire on the part of trade unions to potentially, at least in future, reduce the working week. So the number of hours worked is a significant issue, both locally and nationally. So I'm just wondering, how do we actually record time spent working? Thanks.
Pauline?
In terms of our current arrangements, they're not changed. The contracted base has not changed throughout the pandemic. Individuals have a contracted workplace. Individuals are also able to clock in and out using the flexi-time system, on my view, whether they're at home, in a workplace, or in mobile working. So we can actually record where people are in terms of health and safety, and ensure that their manager will know where they are at any given time in terms of health and safety provisions. So if they're out and about, we have provisions in that in terms of lone working. In terms of being able to advise where people are working, we're able to clock in and see whether they're in a workplace or they're in a home or in their standard contracted base. And they do that when they clock in and out the system. Managers should know where staff are at all time. This is not about, hybrid working is not about what people are doing, it's where they're doing it, because they've been operating effectively throughout the pandemic. In terms of productivity, managers will be managing that.
So Drysdale?
That's fine,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay, I'm now going to take a second question from Bailey Alster. Bailey Alster.
Thank you. Paragraph 4.3 makes a reference to an increasingly competitive labour market. Is the council still finding that to be the case? Because anecdotal evidence as well as data I've seen recently would suggest the heat is certainly coming out of the labour market. Certainly if we compare to how it was 2 years ago when we were coming out of COVID, it seems a lot higher, a lot easier to fill vacancies in the general country. But is PK still finding it increasingly difficult to fill vacancies? Thank you.
Ben Pauline.
It is an offer that many employers are offering to the workforce, and given that Perth and Kinross rurality in some areas, it is attractive in terms of for individuals where they might not have to commute every single day, and therefore that is part of the employment offer that candidates in terms of are looking for as part of a job. And again, we need to remain competitive and be an employer of choice in that area. And you're right, other employers are also moving to bringing people back into the workplace, but it's bringing them back to have culture, to have connections, to actually work together and make sure that some of that's not lost. So it's trying to get the balance between these two things in terms of recruitment and attraction and retention.
Right, Councillor Duff, I'll come to you in a little while, but we've got another 3 questions have just come in. I'm going to ask, first of all, in sequence, Councillor Rebick.
Thanks again, Convener, and thanks, Pauline, for the report. It does feel like hybrid working's working pretty well, and I do welcome the desire to have employees in 2 days a week. I think that's a good idea, and I think it's more or less says this in the report, but just for clarity, if there are material reasons why an employee might actually work 1 day a week or 3 days a week, managers do have the flexibility to manage that appropriately, I think, do they?
Yes, absolutely. It's based on business need, and so you might have particular work activity that an individual could reasonably do in a workplace, not necessarily in their employment base, but in a workplace. And let's not forget, people are out and about all the time and have been, and other occasions where they might be needing quiet space and they can't book a quiet space at work, it would be easier to do certain things at home. And so that's flexibility that can be agreed between the individual and their manager based on business.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor McKeown.
Thank you, Convener. We have a responsibility to our employees for their safety wherever they work. If they choose to work at home, how are we ensuring the environment that they are working in is safe? I do remember joining the council and having to do a safe seat and safe monitor online programme, etc., etc. And the second part of my question, during COVID, we had council products sent home to our home so that we could do hybrid working as councillors from home. Is that the same for current employees, that IT equipment and other things like chairs and desks, et cetera, can be taken to their home to facilitate hybrid working?
When we first moved into the lockdown, individuals were required to do a DSE home assessment, and we did provide relevant equipment to enable them to do that safely. They're expected to make sure that they do their DSE on a regular basis and advise their manager of any other adjustments or supports that's needed to ensure that they're operating in a safe way, not just their desk and their laptop or computer, but also with adequate lighting and appropriate rest breaks. So we are relying on individuals to make sure that they're actually applying fair work and safe work systems in their home place. And if they're in any other workplace and they have to go in and sit down and check all the equipment, check around their provisions and make sure it's all functioning and set to their requirements, not from the last person that was sitting at the table. So these all continue to exist in terms of safe work practices and the individual onus on for them to check their workplace when they come in. The other issue in terms of PAT testing, we provide provision on that on an annual basis so people can bring equipment in and to get that checked on an annual basis as well.
Okay, now going on to Councillor Chan, who did have a question earlier and then indicated that that question had been answered, but he now has another question. Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Convener. I was just wondering if sickness levels have improved under hybrid working. Thank you.
Pauline.
I'm unable to tell where an individual is working in the context of the sickness absence data, but there is no evidence to suggest that there's been any change as a result of people working from home.
Right, finally, Councillor Duff. I don't think we have any further questions. I'll move on to moving the paper. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. My question is on page 142, and in section 4, it talks about working from a distant non-UK base. I'm not going to ask about the potential additional costs of operating laptops from abroad, you'll be pleased to hear, but I wondered what sort of circumstances would it be envisaged working from a non-UK base would be suitable? Thank you.
It's not something that we're routinely advocating that individuals would do, but we did have during the pandemic individuals who were then left in a location who were unable to get back for certain circumstances. There's a whole load of rules and regulations that we're required to put in place to allow people to work safely from abroad, and that means taxation, Wi-Fi in terms of information security. So it's not something that's advocated, and it's only happened in a very small number for particular circumstances.
Thanks. Councillor Barrett is asking for a point of clarification. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. It was just to point out that if you're an elected member, then you can't get your Surface Pro or mobile laptops to roam abroad. The only thing that you can get is roaming on your phone.
Right, thank you for pointing that out. I haven't been abroad myself for some time, so I haven't experienced the issues that arise here, but I may yet. Right, I'm now going to move the report. And what I would say is this: I'm pleased to support this paper, the implementation of the flexible working framework. I think we all know the pandemic resulted in very significant changes in working practices across the board. For many, this was an initial requirement for home working supported by appropriate technology. Then, as we moved out of the pandemic, the workplaces opened up. Many employees returned to work solely from council workplaces, and some continue to operate on a hybrid basis, working from council workplaces as well as their own home. This increased flexibility in how, when, and where employees work fits with the principles in our corporate plan. increasing the opportunities for connecting with our communities, and supporting the ongoing review of council workspaces in Perth City to ensure the best use of our property assets. There's also been a shift in employee expectations of the benefits offered by employers, and increased flexibility in working arrangements forms part of this. We do operate in an increasingly competitive recruitment market, and we need to ensure that the council is an attractive employer with a positive reputation for flexibility, equality, and inclusion in our workplace employment practices. I think offering flexibility in working arrangements, that goes hand in hand with ensuring opportunities for collaborative working and connection on a face-to-face basis with colleagues and partners. This also aligns with our values and our culture. Consultation with staff identified that there are perceived benefits to having a more structured, though, approach to hybrid working. The proposed flexible working framework brings things together. The principles underpinning all flexible working arrangements, existing arrangements updated to reflect current organisation requirements, information on different work styles, including hybrid working. Our committee here is also asked to note that with effect from April 2024, a revised hybrid working approach will establish the requirement for a minimum level of attendance in a workplace of normally 2 days per week. I think this closely aligns with the effective date for some of the legislative changes relevant to the content of the framework. And you'll see in one of the appendices, these legislative aspects are set out. I think there are a couple that are still being considered by the UK Parliament, but there's been quite a lot of change. So I move this paper. Could I ask the Vice Convener to second?
Yes, very happy to second this report. It formalises what we are in fact have been doing. I think it's a sensible move forward to expect maybe 2 days a week being in a building. It's for team building and it's for training as well. I think that's very important as people get to know each other. So I welcome the report. Thank you very much, Polly.
We now move to comments. I'm going to take first of all Deputy Provost Parrott.
Thank you very much, Convener. Can I say I wholeheartedly welcome this report. We live in an era of an ageing population where the workforce is a declining proportion of the whole, and where that workforce is actually absolutely smaller than it was because of a declining birth rate, and where our recruitment opportunities are more limited than they were. I think it's very important that we offer the most flexible working environment possible so that we remain at the forefront of employers that people might wish to work for, and that whilst we're putting a framework in place, we remain flexible in our approach to future change so that we don't lose out on a limited workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I just wanted to welcome this report. I think it gives us some sort of clarity about the actual numbers of people we might expect to be using our office accommodation and other accommodations. So it will allow us to better predict what we actually need in the city centre. So I welcome the report for that reason.
I think it may be final comment, Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Convener. I think this is a very good paper. Last week at the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee, we had a paper on the Community Justice Update Report. And I think the Community Justice Service is an example where hybrid working has been very conducive and it's been carried on from COVID because it provides that collaborative working amongst groups involved in the criminal justice service that would otherwise not share buildings or be close to each other in proximity, but be able to maintain their service and keep each other updated on the tenants and the people that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And I think this is an example where if this can be grown throughout the council, the collaborative working is certainly something that makes things work a lot better and a lot more efficiently. Thank you.
Thanks. And in fact, we certainly have one further comment. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, convener. Just a short comment. I welcome the report and the formalising of this method of working into our working policies, which will hopefully achieve a balance between our business and our customer needs. I'd like to thank Pauline and other members of our team for progressing this policy on our behalf. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Okay, there being no further comments, can we agree the paper? Okay, now we move on to the revenue budget the monitoring paper, and Councillor Lee is going to lead on this paper. So Councillor Lee.
Thanks, councillors. We're now moving back to paper 6, which is the revenue budget 2023-24 update number 3. And without further ado, I'll pass over to Scott Walker to introduce the report.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. This is the third revenue monitoring report for 23-24 and is based on our October ledger. The report sets out a projected net overspend across the council of £1.057 million. I'm pleased to report that since my last update in November, the projected overspend has reduced by around £541,000. I need to stress that these projections are still only based on 7 months worth of actual data and will change. There are still variables that could impact on our final outturn, including any further weather-related events. The committee will receive one more revenue monitoring update later this year at the meeting in April. In section 5 of the report, we provide an update on service revenue budgets. In education and children's services, we're now projecting an underspend of £861,000. This is an improved position primarily due to additional staff slippage and savings from strikes. The other movements across ECS are summarised in the table at paragraph 5.5. Devolved school management budgets remain on target. However, some individual schools are still experiencing challenges in achieving staff slippage targets. And currently we're projecting a £100,000 underspend on the Pupil Equity Fund. Across the community service, we're now projecting an overspend of £623,000. This, however, does include the projected gross cost of weather events to date of £1.232 million and assumed income from the Scottish Government through the Belwyn scheme of £434,000. Therefore, to date, weather-related expenditure is projected to cost the Council £798,000 in the current financial year, which is reflected in the update before you today and is consistent with the terms of the Belwyn scheme. There are other movements across communities which are summarised in the table at paragraph 5.12. And in corporate and democratic services and the Chief Executive Service, we're projecting net overspends of £60,000 and £12,000 respectively. In section 6, we provide an update on our corporate budgets, which include the Health and Social Care Partnership and our Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Section 7 provides an update on council tax and non-domestic rates collection levels. And based on collection data to the end of December, I'm pleased to report we're now projecting additional income of £200,000 from council tax. Section 8 includes commentary on our ALIOs and the Housing Revenue Account. Section 9 includes information on additional revenue support grant and other grants. Section 10 sets out adjustments between budget headings that result in no change in the level of council spend. And Section 11 includes updates on our reserves position. We're seeking your approval for transfers in and out of several earmarked reserves, including culture, transformation and council approved projects. Approval is also sought to apply unearmarked reserves towards the current year costs of the 23-24 pay awards. On the basis that the proposals within this report are agreed, our earmarked reserves are projected to increase to £29.757 million, and our unearmarked reserves are projected to reduce to £14.017 million, or 3.1%. Colleagues and I are available to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Walker. So I'll open up for questions. Any questions from the chamber? Deputy Provost Andrew Parrott.
Thank you, Arch Vice Convener. I'm on page 77 and looking at the table of the number of Band D equivalent properties. I note that the number of Band D equivalent properties has been rising at something in excess of 1% per annum for each of the last 4 years. But the population is not rising anything like as much as that. The population is perhaps going up only 1% a decade at the moment. That suggests to me that we must be having a lot more properties across the county that qualify for the single person occupancy council tax rate, and that must impact on our total revenue. Do we take that into, do we do any calculations of the number of single occupancy households that we have across the county, and are we factoring that into our revenue projections for the council tax? Thanks.
So yes, we do build in single person to our calculations. However, if I take you back to the chart, all of our council tax calculations are based on what's called Band D equivalent properties. So Band D is the base on which we base everything. If Band H properties are brought in, that brings in 2.2 Band D equivalent properties. So there's not actually a correlation between the number of people and then my houses. So if we're getting more houses of higher value, that helps our Band D position. Does that make sense?
I accept the calculation you're making, but the simple to me comparison between the number of properties, whether they're Band D or Band H, and the population total suggests that there have to be a greater proportion of the houses in our total housing stock qualify for single person occupancy rates, which must have a depressing effect to a degree on revenue, and I wonder if we are taking that fully into account. Thanks.
So we are absolutely taking into account the number of single person discounts. We work because you also get discounts for other areas in council tax, so that comes off of our council tax base as well. So these figures are factored into our assumptions going forward.
Thanks, Councillor Rebbett.
Thank you, Deputy Convener / Leader. It was just a couple of points I noted in Appendix 4 in terms of our housing rent. I think we have an underspend on bad debt provision of £300,000, which feels like a real important positive thing. And there's a couple of other things there. For example, we've spent 20 grand, or it looks like we're going to spend £20,000 less in Letham on sheriff officers' fees. I do see firsthand the empathetic but progressive way our housing officers try and realise debt for us. And we're also, I think we're all aware of the great work that the welfare rights team do. And I'm wondering if these underspends are connected to both these things, both these examples of good work by our officers. Thanks.
I'm going to ask if my colleagues on the call, Caroline France or Stephen Coyle, are able to comment on that specific question.
I'll come in, Scott, if that's okay. The bad debt provision is linked to the rent arrears position across the housing revenue account. So any positive outcomes within the approach to rent arrears will have an impact on the level of bad debt provision that we require to make at the financial year end in the HRA. In terms of the sheriff officer fee underspend, I think part of that may be related to the sort of less sort of court action being undertaken, I think due to the tenant protection bill that was put in place as well, so that there's a combination of that factor as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, I'm on top of page 73 under section 5.5. There's an underspend of £456,000 on catering services. And that seems to have a movement in the right direction of 183,000. I'm a bit confused, just the catering services with food prices going up and so on. So what does this relate to?
So I'm happy to start this, and perhaps colleagues can jump in as well. School meal uptake is on the up. Therefore, we're seeing a positive impact in terms of the levels of income in catering services and education and children's services. I don't know, Claire Palmer, are you on the call?
Yes, yes. So that's exactly right. Scott, the number of paid meals within the service has increased. So we are now we are above our current income target for catering. So that's why we've seen the positive move in the budgets.
Okay, maybe want to take that offline for further detail, as I will. Bailey.
Thank you. My question's about 11.6 in the report, where we're dealing with the transfer of some money from a reserve to Culture Perth and Kinross in order to essentially provide seed funding, for want of a better word, of close to 200,000 for the setup of the Perth Museum Cafe. A double-barreled sort of question about this. First of all is how much of that would have been needed if we'd found a private operator? And secondly, do any of the terms and conditions in the Tay Cities monies preclude us from using that money or using that building to set up a state-funded competitor to privately owned local eateries, just in case there's anything in the fine print there? Thank you.
Thanks. I think I'll pass that to Fiona Robertson, but if we could all up the screen, please, Reese, so as I can see who's on the call instead of just having the blank screen, it would help. So Fiona, if you're there, can you answer that, please?
I'm here, Councillor Lang. Bailey, on the first part of your question, we wouldn't have had to put any of that money up. The expectation was that a private operator would have met the costs of final fit out of the cafe and obviously brought in their own staff team as well. I think fair to say we did have a lot of interest initially from potential bidders for that contract. On the second question, CPK is a charity. It is entitled as a charity to operate a cafe, proceeds of which through its trading account are reinvested in the charitable services which it delivers on behalf of the community. There's nothing in the Tay City deal funding conditions in relation to Perth Museum to stop CPK from doing that, and the inclusion of a cafe as part of the income stream for Perth Museum is part of the full business case which was approved through the Tay City deal process.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Vice Convener. My question is on page 75 at 6.3, where it talks about the projected overspend of £2.125 million within the Health and Social Care Partnership, I think of which 1.6 million comes from undelivered savings. Just wondered if there are proposals being worked on to bring this overspend back into line, or is a year-end overspend going to be forecast? Thank you.
So my understanding is that the IGB are proposing to fund this from their own reserves in the current year. So there's no financial impact on the council in the current year. That will also be brought forward as part of their budget proposals going forward, so that they can deliver a sustainable budget from 24-25 onwards.
Thanks. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. My questions go back to those raised by Bailey. I wanted to ask, relating to 11.5, why is the cafe operator not fitting out the cafe and paying the costs for those? And are we satisfied that CPK are able to maximise the commercial value or operations of the cafe? And if we're not, what are we doing about it?
Thanks, Fiona.
Councillor Barrett, I'll hand over to Helen Smout to take your second question and just run through with you all the work that's underway in Culture Perth and Kinross around maximising the benefit of the cafe when it does open. On your first question, we are requesting drawdown from cultural reserves to give CPK support with the one-off cost of fitting out the cafe, because CPK's own reserves are in this year fully committed elsewhere, including as discussed in BRG groups meetings, the cost of meeting their pay pressures for the coming year. Helen, do you want to just give a bit of a picture of the cafe and the work in hand at the moment, please?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. So a cafe was an essential part of the business case for the museum, and is certainly one of the things that is most asked for from tour operators coming into the area and from visitors as part of the provision of a museum experience for visitors. So there's a lot of guidance and support for us as an organisation through Museums Association, Independent Association and others around running cafe provision specifically within a museum and a visitor environment, which requires one or two other considerations than perhaps an ordinary cafe on the street might need. So we have been using all of the resources that are available to us, and indeed the support of some expertise within the council and with others, to ensure that the cafe provision that we operate not only is sustainable in the long term, but also is exactly what visitors to the city are looking for as part of a museum experience. We've certainly got quite a lot recently. We've had familiarisation visits with North American tour operators and others, and Visit Scotland on Sunday commented very positively on the fact that we had a cafe provision there and that it would be in-house. They recognised that that was the way to run a successful museum provision in the current climate, and that it was one of the things that would make people visit, whereas other venues which are not so lucky to have that are not necessarily going to be at the top of tour operators' agendas.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks for that, convener. Yeah, I'm with you, Helen, as regards the essential element of need for a profitable cafe to contribute to minimising the operating costs of the museum. I really just want to seek confidence that the in-house solution is the best way to do that.
Yeah,
Helen?
Absolutely, thank you. One of the works that we did in the run-up to this was quite an extensive piece of options appraisal, looking at different options in terms of running the cafe, and coming to the decision to run it in-house was based on some of that background work, and indeed things like the timescale in the run-up to the opening. So, we will operate a cafe and we will deliver something with confidence that will meet the offer and the expectations of visitors in time for opening, and some of the other options would have put some of that at risk. So I understand the concerns that people may have. However, I can assure the committee that we are putting a lot of time, effort and energy into ensuring that this will work, because none of us can afford for it not to.
Thanks, Helen. Next question is Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Vice Convener. It was in relation to the council tax reduction scheme at paragraph 6.7. We've got an overspend there of over £1 million. Can I ask, first of all, what the total budget is, so that we can work out what sort of percentage of overspend there is, and what are we doing to bring that situation back under control? Because that sounds like a massive overspend in terms of the you know, the overall council position.
Okay, so the net budget is £6.2 million for council tax reduction scheme. This is an area we have dealt with over the last couple of years through the council tax income account. However, going forward, we've recognised it as a budget pressure, and we are bringing that forward as a recurring pressure that you'll be asked to approve when you set the budget on the 28th of February. So that'll take the budget up to £7.4 million. It's an area where we don't have any control over. If citizens present and they are entitled to the scheme, then we are by law required to provide that support.
Thanks, Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I think I do have to come back on the question of the school meals and the underspend. My understanding is that we earn something like £2.30 per meal, but we're paying £4.70 per meal. So how can we show an underspend when what we're doing is creating a bigger cost in the long term?
I don't know if you want to take that, Scott, or pass it over.
I'm happy to start the answer. So we do charge parents £2.30. There is an element of parental subsidy. The figures you're quoting there have been provided to us. We are working through them because we are not sure that we agree with the £4.70 because we're not sure there are apples and apples being compared on that. You're aware we are working with all councillors in terms of understanding the Tayside Contracts meal position. I would suggest that we take it offline and have a more detailed discussion about the particular issue, because you'll be aware we are also bringing this forward as part of the budget proposals going forward. So again, happy to spend a bit of time with you on this.
Yeah, of course.
I'm happy to take it offline. It's just the question of how it's being represented here, where we're showing a saving, if you like, when we actually know that there is a cost accumulating. I think it needs to be thought about in the accounting representation.
Okay, I mean, Claire, do you want to come in here? But again, happy to look at the presentation. This is how it's been reflected in our monitoring. It's a better news story than it was when we were here before. But again, happy to consider how we present it better so it's a more transparent method for councillors to understand.
Yeah, so it is a reporting based on what our budget targets were for this financial year. We are looking at that position for next year, and it is feeding into the pressures and savings that we do have in for next year to adjust that, so to avoid or to address this kind of imbalance that we would have. But it is essentially that additional income has created more income than our target has. So that's why that's reported in there. As Scott said, we're looking at the whole catering picture and hopefully addressing it through the budget process.
Thanks. Are you content for now? Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much. Taking you back to the council tax reduction scheme, question stroke sort of clarification of what I think in my head regarding this is that this is a statutory thing that we have to promote and encourage, that we've invested in our welfare rights team at a point of where people are in financial crisis. There has been a huge increase in people then being able to take up this option through our advice, and therefore there's been increased expenditure on that, which we've detailed in the report. Is that correct? Is the first question. The second part of that is, do we know how many people out in Perth and Kinross who could claim the council tax reduction scheme are not claiming it? It sounds a bit like national benefits where people don't claim them, and we need to get the welfare rights team in to help support people to get this money first type principle.
So I'll start with the second question first. We, Nick Sutherland and our crew are absolutely maximising awareness of the council tax reduction scheme, and that's why we're seeing the numbers coming through that we are coming through. And sorry, could you read the first part?
The clarity that it's statutory and people, and we're just more aware of people because more people are coming forward, and welfare rights are uncovering that people are allowed to claim this reduction.
Yeah, it's absolutely statutory. If people present and they meet the criteria, then we are duty bound to pass the benefit on to them.
Would this be related to the point that Councillor Parrott was trying to make, that there'll be more single living people, if you want, across Perth and Kinross?
Not necessarily, because if you're single, you get the single person discount. The council tax reduction scheme is a different relief or a different benefit available to people of Perth Kinross.
Thanks. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks again, convener. I was looking for some clarification of paragraphs 8.3 and 8.4 with regard to LAO's deficits and their ability to absorb the cost of the winter severe weather within their 23-24 budget. And I just wondered, it didn't seem plausible to me, Scott, and if they've got a budgeted shortfall or deficit of 630,000, they must be short of that at the moment if they're going to absorb the costs of the severe weather incident.
I think the revised budget deficit at their presentation on Monday was down to 300 and something thousand at that time, but Scott will know better than I do.
I'm happy to start off, but Fiona Robertson might be able to jump in as well. Last time we were in front of the committee, we had reported that the budgeted deficit was reducing, which was positive. When we last met with them just before Christmas, it was back to the original deficit of £630,000. But Councillor Lang's right, when we saw the presentation on Monday, they were back down at the 300 odd thousand pounds that they were reporting. So they are saying right now that they are covering the lost income from Bells as part of their margin. Fiona, is there anything you want to add?
No, nothing really to add to that, Scott. We have asked Lyle to give us a little bit more detail on how activities that were being delivered from Bells have been relocated to other locations in the city centre, which some of them it has been possible to do that, and how the income is now panning out now that we're 3 or 4 months on from the closure of Bells.
Mr. Barrett,
No, it's all right, convener.
Thanks. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Vice Convener. It's a question on the same, exact same few paragraphs as Councillor Barrett, but focusing perhaps more on the latter one. 8.4, LAL's projected deficits in 21-22 and 22-23 did not materialise. They have a budgeted deficit this year of 630,000, which we've heard is reduced, and it's expecting that to rise to 1.3 million in 24-25. Are we confident about LAL's budgeting for their deficit? If for 2 years running their budgeted deficit hasn't materialised, this year it looks like it's going to be half of what was budgeted for. How much confidence do the officers have in that, in these budget figures?
So we're working closely with LAL. You're absolutely right. They have projected significant overspends in the last 2 years, which have either not come through or been significantly reduced, which is why we are advising the committee of that. They are in a challenging situation, obviously, with the Bells position. But myself and Fiona work closely with the new finance managers to get behind these figures, to try and understand their assumptions, and we bring the information back to the committee.
Okay, are there no further questions on this report? I don't see any, so I will move the report. First of all, I'd like to thank all the elected members for their questions, and a lot of their questions were around our alios and partners rather than the business that's conducted by our finance team directly. So thanks for all your questions. This is the third revenue monitoring update for financial year 23-24. Scott Walker's already provided us with detailed commentary on the contents of the report. The report sets out a projected overspend of 1.057 million, which is an improvement of over 500,000 from our last update. As is the case with every projection we receive, the position will move and continues to move and we will receive a further update on 23-24 in April. In terms of the contents of the report, I would like to draw the committee's attention to several matters that have, as well as the ones that have been raised by elected members themselves. I welcome the increase in the projected underspend of around 300,000 across our services, and I'd like to thank officers across the council for managing their budgets so effectively. I note the financial challenges being experienced by our colleagues across the Health and Social Care Partnership. I also welcome the latest council tax income projections, which show £200,000 of additional income. Finally, I welcome almost 4.5 million of additional funding from the Scottish Government, of which 4.2 million of this additional funding relates to pay awards and the Scottish Government's financial commitment to supporting our workers. As ever, I want to place on record my thanks to the Chief Executive and all the staff across the whole of the Council for their continued effort in managing budgets in this difficult financial situation. I look forward to receiving the final update in April. I'll move the paper and I'll pass to the convener to second.
Yes, I'm more than happy to second the paper. Councillor Lake.
I was sitting back waiting for a speech there and it wasn't coming, so I'll now move on to comments. Councillor Revick.
Thanks again. I just want to comment briefly actually on pupil equity funding, which was mentioned in the report. We have £100,000 underspend, and I think it's important to note, as I've alluded to before actually, that often the underspend is actually down to good planning by our head teachers and our senior leaders in our schools who are procuring resource, whether it's human resource or physical resource, in advance, and often that funding therefore goes into the following year. I think it's also really important to note, as I think we enter our 7th year of Pupil Equity Fund, how our head teachers and our senior leaders in our schools have become really good, professional and indeed imaginative in how they're spending this money. It's become a really important part of a school's budget actually, particularly in our stated desire to support our kids with additional support need insofar as we possibly can, and actually it allows our teachers, the ones who know in fact on a day-to-day basis where the gaps in their pupils' learning are, it allows them to target those gaps very specifically and deliberately, and I think we just need to recognise the good work of our school staff in this regard. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Revick. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I'm not planning to go into the detail of the report in any way, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Scott Walker and his finance team for producing the report. It's always a complex picture, and those of us that are on the BRGs know how challenging things are going to be at the budget meeting next month. But it's always, I'm comforted by the knowledge and responses provided by the officers. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. Just like to comment, I think this finance report is showing the pressures on the people of Perth and Kinross with the financial crisis. And I think also that the paper demonstrates that our housing officers, both in the housing team and within welfare rights, are working very hard to support these individuals to help them through what is a crisis within our time, and something that I think is appalling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. I really just wanted to respond to the comment you made about thanking the Scottish Government for their contribution to the pay settlement for our staff. And they may have contributed part of the pay settlement in this year, but unfortunately in the settlement that's been announced, they're not contributing anything to future pay awards, and neither are they fully funding their imposed council tax freeze. So I do think that we need to be balanced in our commentary on the lack of support from the Scottish Government financially.
Thank you for that. We'll take two sides of the coin there. Thank you. Do we have any other comments? No more comments. Can we agree the paper?
Okay, We now move on to the last paper of today. Okay, yeah, it's 15:30. If we make it 15:40, okay. Okay, order. Right, we'll just move on to the last paper of today, and that's the Composite Capital Budget Report 23-28, and also the Housing Investment Programme Report 23-28. And this is the third monitoring report and of this financial year. And I'm going to ask Stuart Mackenzie, our Head of Finance, to introduce the paper. Stuart.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. This report provides an update on progress of the Council's approved capital budget and housing investment programme based upon expenditure to the end of November last year. Section 5 and Appendix 1 to the report sets out the resourcing of the budget with expenditure on the General Fund programme to 27-28, currently estimated at approximately £623.9 million. And that's £432,000 more than the position reported in November, mainly due to an increase in Scottish Government capital grant funding in the current year. The Council's borrowing requirement in the current financial year is estimated at £142.1 million, a net reduction of £4.6 million, reflecting the rephasing of expenditure into future years as described within the report and summarised in the table at 5.8. Section 6 and Appendix 2 detail progress of the General Fund programme to date, together with recommended adjustments to the budget. Net expenditure to the 30th of November was approximately £88.4 million. This is £33 million more than a position at the end of December last year, reflecting a current level of expenditure on major projects. Whilst construction inflation is independently reported as continuing to slow, members will be aware of the potential economic as well as the humanitarian impact of the current situation in the Middle East. Proposed adjustments to the General Fund programme include the allocation of additional Scottish Government funding to childcare and road safety programmes, and the rephasing of works on Perth Grammar School following the removal and replacement of rack roofing. There is also a rephasing of the budget for the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, which remains due to be completed on a phased basis between December of this year and Easter 2025. Given changes to forecast housing completion rates at Bertha Park, it is proposed to review the timescale for the delivery of a new primary school in line with need, with a recommendation that the budget be rephased by 2 years. The outcome of this review will be reported to a future meeting of the committee. Members should, however, note that there may be additional costs incurred in rezoning pupils where necessary during this period. There are proposed adjustments in respect to the Bridges programme, roads improvement schemes and potential borrowing projects. It is also proposed to rephase £3 million of budgeted expenditure on Perth West enabling works into next year, together with Tay Cities Deal funding for the project, pending ongoing discussions with the landowner. And as normal, Appendix 4 to the report provides members with an overview of progress on significant General Fund capital projects. Moving on, Section 7 and Appendix 3 to the report detail progress of the Housing Investment Programme. The total 5-year housing programme remains unchanged at £92.2 million, with net expenditure to the 30th of November amounting to approximately £12.5 million. The report recommends increasing the resources for the Council House buyback programme in the current year, drawing down £2.1 million from the future development budget to support investment in the central heating programme over the next 4 years, and accelerating £670,000 of expenditure on energy efficiency measures into the current year. The report further recommends rephasing £1.8 million of budgeted improvements to the Council's multi-storey flats into next year to allow for an updated scope to be prepared, and the rephasing into next financial year of £2.975 million for the St Catherine's Square redevelopment. Subject to the approval of the adjustments set out within the report, projected outturn expenditure in the Ground Fund programme at the end of this year is currently estimated at £169.8 million, or 95% of the budget approved in April. At the end of November, £88.4 million, or 52% of this projected expenditure, had been incurred. The projected outturn position for a housing investment programme is estimated at £18.7 million, or 92% of the budget approved in April. At the end of November, approximately £12.5 million, or 66% of this projected expenditure, had been incurred. As members will be aware, from both the current and previous reports, there are significant financial challenges in delivering the Council's capital ambitions at a time when the Council is already on site with several major projects. Borrowing costs are higher than they have been over the past decade. A briefing for Budget Review Group members will be provided Monday to support members in their consideration and setting of a prudent and sustainable capital budget and funding strategy at Special Council in February. Colleagues and I are happy to take questions. Convener.
Stuart, thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr Mackenzie, for your report. There has been a degree of publicity locally in the media recently about the comparative level of debt of this council versus the Scottish average and the UK average, and implied concerns about serviceability. Appreciating all that you have just said in your report there, can you give members of the public who may be watching this a degree of assurance that in terms of the robustness of the monitoring and supervision of the capital budget in general, and possibly if I may just ask as well, can you set out in terms of the major projects that you have summarised in the report, the degree to which these are within budget and on time? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Drysdale, for your question. I appreciate the question and the concern. The council has an ambitious capital programme, and financing of that programme is a challenge not only for ourselves but for all local authorities. So there's perhaps two things to think about. There's one is the absolute level of debt that the council is servicing at any point in time and its requirements going forward. And the second thing is how that sits in terms of the overall council revenue budget. Now that both of these measures are what known as prudential indicators. You've previously seen them in the Treasury reports. You will see them at the next meeting of the committee in the Treasury report. In terms of where we sit, comparatively speaking, obviously the direction of travel is that our debt will increase because we're servicing a large and ambitious capital programme. But at present, and in comparison to other local authorities, we are there or thereabouts in terms of the percentage of our budget which is allocated towards servicing that debt. And as members will recall from earlier Treasury management reports, our relative interest rate on the debt that we have is comparatively low compared to other local authorities. So there is a challenge there, and we will be bringing forward proposals in terms of managing that challenge to elected members as part of the budget process. But it's recognised. The second thing is in terms of where we are on the major projects, and I'm thinking here about Destiny, the Destiny Bridge, formerly the Crossty Link Road. I'm thinking about Perth High School replacement, and I'm thinking about Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, which are 3 major projects we have. As far as I'm aware, there's no significant overspends reported on any of those projects at this point in time, as you can see from the report. I hope that answers the question.
Eric?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next is Bailey. Ulster?
Thank you. Dwelling for a moment on that 600 million debt figure that was reported by the BBC and then by the Perthshire Advertiser locally. I spent a bit of time, I'll be honest, foolishly looking for that figure in this report. Then I realised that obviously debt and borrowing are quite different entities. So I suppose my question is twofold. First of all, do we recognise that 600 million figure? I guess it will be different now because that was end of last fiscal year. And then also, what's the Clapham Omnibus friendly description, the layperson friendly description of the difference between debt and borrowing, please? I've kind of figured it out, I think, but you'll be the best person to explain that to a layperson. Thank you.
Stuart.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Bailey, for that challenge. I was watching University Challenge last night, and I'm not sure there's any more difficult question came up last night. In terms of an explanation and drawing a distinction between the two, the figures which were quoted by the BBC are there or thereabouts. And just for the record, and thank you for the heads up on the question, for the benefit of elected members in the committee, our borrowing position as of today is £623 million. That's the debt. That's the position. That's the debt. The vast bulk of that is outstanding debt with Public Works Loans Board, £575 million. And around about 3/4 of our capital budget is financed through borrowing, and all of that essentially comes from the PWLB because that's the cheapest route we have at the moment. Now, that's debt which the council has incurred and we are servicing. By the end of the current approved capital budget, and council is going to consider that again in February, the PWLB element of that will increase to just over £1 billion. So from where we are today, 575 million, to the end of March 2028, that figure will increase to just over £1 billion. But we haven't borrowed that money. That's not debt. That's a forecast of what we require to borrow to service the approved capital programme. And that in itself is dependent on decisions by council and elected members. So we have debt on the books, which we are required to service, and a forecast for debt going forward, which we haven't borrowed yet, and we aren't incurring expenditure on. Does that help? Thank you.
Deputy Provost Parrott. Andrew?
Thank you very much, Convener. My question actually has been largely addressed by the previous one, but can Mr. Mackenzie give assurance that, and I know that at the moment through the very good works of our Treasury team, the interest we're paying on our debt is, I think, at a considerable discount to the Scottish average. Given the borrowing requirements of the next 4 years, when we're obviously having to borrow in the market, will our debt still be at any, if you like, discount to the overall Scottish average, or will the next 4 years, because we're having to borrow at market rates, remove the discount that we currently enjoy through the good decisions that have been taken in the past? Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Deputy Provost Parrott. We will certainly see our average cost of borrowing increase because we are subject to market conditions. So perhaps to help elected members in explaining this, when we borrow from the Public Works Loans Board, we do not borrow at an advanced rate. It's a market rate, and that fluctuates from day to day, and indeed it fluctuates at 2 points during the day, and we get regular daily updates on what the market rates are for different borrowing periods from the Public Works Loans Board, which is effectively the Treasury. and that in itself reflects the cost of to the UK government of its external borrowing. So it's a market rate, it's a spot rate. The modelling that we will be bringing to elected members around the capital budget and the affordability of the capital budget factors in a significant increase in the short term over the rates we've seen of around about 2.6% over the last 10 years. We're now expecting to be near 4.4%, 4.5% in the short term. And then moving forward, we expect those figures to reduce. That will again be dependent on the health of the economy and what happens to general inflation over the coming months and years. But yes, we will see an increase in our average borrowing costs. However, the debt we have taken out, that £75 million, the rate we're paying on that is hardwired. It will not change. So we have the benefit of earlier decisions and earlier market conditions. The challenge we have going forward is that the cost of new borrowing is going to be higher, perhaps significantly higher.
Thank you, Raj.
Okay, next is Councillor Barrett. Peter?
Thanks, convener. Paragraph 7.7 refers to the latest delays to afflict the contract for works on the multi-storey flats and their improvements. This project seems to be something of a chimera, given that it's both seems to be an illusory project that we're never going to realise, as well as a monster. So, can I ask, is the timescale that's delayed this by another year realistic, and can we actually have a definitive project plan that we can hold officers and the convener to actually deliver on the multi-storey flat improvements?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, and I know it's a matter you've raised on one or two occasions previously. I'm going to refer first of all to Stuart, but it may be one or two other council officers wish to come in.
Oh. I have a colleague who can provide a response, Councillor Barrett, online. Thank you. Elaine.
Elaine.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Barrett. Yeah, I appreciate your frustration with the delays with our multi-storey project. We've had significant delays just with procurement. We went through a massive procurement exercise and we got no contractors bidding for the actual work. So we had to collapse the whole framework and restart, which has led to significant delays. But on a positive, we've now got a contractor on site, and I'm just in the middle of pulling together an elected members briefing, giving some reassurance regarding the delays and with some time scales on that. So yes, I do apologise and heavily frustrated. It's just the market just now in terms of trades. We're all competing with each other in terms of refurbishments, retrofit assessments. It's a difficult, volatile market out there just now. However, we do have a contractor now on site.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. That is encouraging, and I'll cross my fingers for that as well, convener. I think I really would like to see, a definitive project plan for all of the multi-stories, because, it's overdue and we need it. So,
Elaine, does anyone wish to follow up on that?
Just I would agree, it's frustrating for officers on the ground, but yeah, we are working to it and we will get a project plan. We've got a contractor now on site, so things are looking a lot more positive.
Right, thanks. And there will be an elected member briefing, and certainly we want to make good progress on that front. Next is Councillor Duff. Yes, Councillor Duff.
Thanks, convener. My questions on paragraph 6.3.2 on page 109, and it tells us that we received additional grant funding of £200,000 under the Cycling, Walking and Safer Routes programme, but we're having to reschedule some of the funding that we have for the 20 mile per hour signage programme for schools. I'm trying to work out, is this using the additional funding that we've got to implement that same programme round about the schools, or are we having to put back our priority for schools speed limits in favour of some other project? Just a bit of clarification there, please.
I think, Councillor Duff, that my understanding is because of capacity, we want to spend the grant funding, which is coming in first, rather than lose it by spending our own funding. That way we'll be able to utilise all, but I may be wrong.
That is correct, Councillor Lane. I don't know if Fraser wishes to, or is in a position to elaborate upon that.
Thank you, Stuart. Apologies, the hand raising function doesn't seem to be correct, but yes, it's exactly as you described. The additional funding will in effect displace our core funding into the following year.
Okay, well, that's suffice.
Sorry, just if I could just have a follow up then. In relation then to the additional funding that the Scottish Government have given us for this, presumably then it doesn't include the ability to bring in additional resources to do that work as well as our own priority.
I think it's a matter of timing. I could be mistaken, but there are time restrictions regarding the spend, and as you'll be aware, there are some real challenges in simply retaining the team members that we have at the moment. So the ability to bring in additional resourcing at such short notice is unlikely to happen.
Okay, thanks. I think it is a bit of a perennial problem with additional grants. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the team have lost 2 members in the last fortnight, so it's capacity within the council as well. It's a problem. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks, Fraser. Right, we're going to move on now to Councillor Stewart. Colin?
Thanks, Convener. Can I go back to the question of the BBC PA debt ranking figures, and just picking up on I think where Deputy Provost Parrott was asking about, Mr. Mackenzie, you said that the rates that we're paying at the moment are, I think you said 2.6%. You're expecting some increase to 4.5%. What are, I mean, that's the rates of interest that we're paying. Can I ask what the actual cost per year to the revenue budget of the borrowing is, and what it would be projected if the, as suggested, the capital budget increases to £1 billion?
Sure.
Thank you. So the increase of £1 billion is a forecast increase in the overall resourcing requirement for the capital budget, both current, future in terms of the next 6 years, and historic, because we have debt which relates to expenditure incurred 20, 30 years ago, well, certainly over the period of this local authority's existence. I don't have those figures to hand. Scott, if you can just remind me what the loan charges budget is. Apologies, that is a bit of a hospital pass. That was unfair.
Thank you for that. So our general fund loans budget is around about £15 million for 23-24, and we predict that it's going to rise to about 23 million by 38-39, 23.5 million by 39-40.
Thanks.
Okay. By the way, I think one thing that will assist, obviously at this meeting, we don't have a Treasury management paper given the decision we took last time, and they are only going to come twice a year, and that aligns with SITFA requirements. but my understanding is that there will be an elected member briefing reasonably soon in terms of our investments, our current position, and I think that's important for the budget process. Now, looking here, I've got Scott. Yeah, there's 2 points of clarification. Scott Walker, and then our vice convener, Grant Ling. So, Scott, you first.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that that's based on the current budget. That's before any adjustments may or may not take place on the 28th of February this year.
Thanks, Grant.
I was just wanting to confirm that Colin probably got it right, but the way I understood him, the rate on the current borrowing figure will not rise to 4. It'll stay at what is. It's only the new borrowing, if you want, if we're going to fulfil the current capital budget, that'll be at a higher rate.
Absolutely correct. So what we borrow is we have what are known as fixed rate. PWLB borrowings effectively a fixed rate maturity loan. So the point we borrow it, that's when we tied into that rate. So when we borrowed at sub 2% over £100 million, tied into that rate. So yes, that won't change. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Next question, and it may be our last question, is from Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Cuthbert, Dave.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I want to stay on the same subject. I think I'm correct in saying that this is, we're talking about the servicing of the debt, and that's the interest we pay on the debt. But what I've never got my head around, I'm still struggling with, is how do we repay the capital sum? Is that paid in equal instalments? Because if you take £1 million loan, you're then going to have to pay £20 million a year back over a 50-year period, for example. So does that mean we have to find another £20 million savings in the revenue account, or how does it work? I really don't understand that.
Sure.
Thank you. So there's almost a distinction between the budgeting and the accounting. In accounting terms, we reflect both repayment of interest and repayment of principal, but these are maturity loans. So the actual principal outstanding falls due at the end of the loan period. We repay interest during that period, and we account for that and we factor that into our calculations. So you'll sometimes, if you can think back to, again, I'm referring to the Treasury reports, and apologies for that, but we will have one to you next cycle. You'll sometimes see, we talk about maturing debt. That's the repayment of principal, and we factor that into our long-term calculations. But the key message around all of this is that the Council does have an ambitious programme. Most of that programme is funded through borrowing. The cost of that borrowing is going to increase over time, and elected members, and you clearly are, mindful of the sustainability of that and the impact that directly has on the revenue budget, because servicing the cost of that borrowing is a revenue cost.
Anything further?
Yeah, it just concerns me that what you're really saying, I think, is that when the bond or whatever it is matures, we have to repay the full capital amount. So are we therefore saving up big problems for our children and grandchildren, where they're suddenly going to have to pay £150 million off for the bridge, for example, or so it doesn't get spaced out over the period it's borrowed for?
Sure.
No, we do factor into our budgeting, so it's not as if we're sitting with no provision for all of that repayment. That's factored in as part of our budgeting, but it's just how the actual mechanics of the loan work, that we're physically repaying principal and then we pay the actual interest at the end. So we pay interest and then we pay the principal at the end of the debt period, but we budget for that. And to be blunt, it's a subject which is far better taken offline and talked about in some detail than perhaps me trying to explain it without the benefit of a diagram.
Okay, Grant, Councillor Ling, you've got a question as well.
Yeah, hopefully the question will get some clarity. And there's different projects with different ways of financing, and some of the projects that we do to enable house building, etc., can be funded through developer contributions towards that. So it doesn't necessarily have to come out of an existing revenue budget. Is that correct?
That's correct, and one of the things that we intend to show as part of the report to Council in February is a little bit more of a background to developer contributions and our forecast developer contributions. We're essentially cash flowing that work because we're incurring expenditure now, where the money will come in over a period of time. But as Councillor Lane says, that money will come in over a period of time. So it's a complex picture, and I think that's why it's perhaps worth having a little bit more in-depth look in a different venue.
Any more questions? Okay, I'm going to move the paper. Can I just say, first of all, I think the elected member briefing will be helpful. I would make one other comment on is the actual structure of our debt and is the maturity of the debt. One thing, even though we have more recently, and I think it'll come out in the elected member briefing, moved to more the short, medium end of the market in terms of borrowing, overall, our debt structure is such it tends to be longer dated, and that avoids the risk, what you call rollover risk, that you suddenly hit with a large amount of debt at one point. I think it is structured. I think it's effective. What I want to say is I think Stuart Mackenzie, as Head of Finance, has provided us with detailed commentary on the contents of the Capital Monitoring Report. I'm going to say a few words about Stuart at the very end, but not right now. What I do want to say is with Appendix 4, I think that provides us with a very good summary of our major capital projects. And that was introduced with a number of councillors requesting that. I think it was about 15, 18 months ago. And I think that appendix is very helpful. What the report tells us is of the continued good progress, and that includes the Perth Museum opening this spring, and that'll be a major moment for Perth and for Perthshire, and that'll be at the Easter weekend, and I simply cannot wait for that. I think it's really quite exciting. And also, I've said before, the Long Perth Museum and add in the art gallery. If you take the two together, it really gives a very attractive proposition for visitors to Perth, but also very much to local residents. I'd also mention Blairgowrie Rec, and that will be open from December this year. And I think I'm right saying on the existing building, that'll be slightly later on. But at last, we're moving towards completion on that vital facility for people there and also nearby. On Destiny Bridge, and that'll be opening, I don't have an exact date, but in the spring 2025. So, you know, it's only 14, 15 months away before that happens. And on Perth High School, which will be open in the construction, the changes there, that'll be completed hopefully by the summer of 2025, a year and a half, maybe slightly less from now. I would also note the rephasing of the new primary school at Bertha Park. What is the position there is the evidence, there's no doubt this will happen. It must happen, but it's just, it won't be to the original time scale. And this is not kicking the can down the road. It matters in terms of the projections near term in terms of building of houses. It's something that officers will very much so keep under and monitor and under review. I also welcome the additional Scottish Government funding for cycling, for walking and safer streets, and that's going to help with school road safety measures. And good progress overall is being made on the delivery of what is almost 624 million of investment across Perth and Kinross. And remember, that is investment that's going to enhance our schools, our roads, our bridges, our buildings, and other infrastructure. I stress the word infrastructure across the entire council area. Its investment, I think, will be welcomed by a large section of our communities, our community, and also by visitors. The report also sets out over some 92 million of expenditure on the housing investment programme over the next 5 years. Again, it's investment that will add to and enhance our existing housing stock. Finally, I would like to place on record my continued thanks to officers, not just Stuart and Scott, but to so many others for their immense efforts in ensuring delivery of this council's, this administration's capital programme during what are tough and difficult times. So I move the report. Councillor Lake.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Happy to second the report. I do think, as we've said, this is over, capital programme and money that's been borrowed over the last 20, 30 years. So I don't take it as totally the administration's capital budget. And there's been people done work before it from all political parties to bring us to this point. So I think it's we're in the position now that all these things, we move into a SIAG, a group where it will be all political parties that will drive forward with a full council capital budget, and that's the way it has to be if we're going to make joint and sensible decisions. I'd like to thank the officers again, as I did in the previous paper, for working in such difficult financial times and giving us advice, some of which, as we showed last week, we don't actually follow all the time of where the capital budget spend should be, but that's our decision. But they're giving us sound advice in the way we should move forward. So thank them for doing that. So happy to send the report.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. In terms of comment, Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Convener. Appendix 3 of the report has the Housing Revenue Capital Investment Programme, which has a line in it that mentions the Double Dykes Gypsy Traveller site. Last week, we approved a press release to go out about Double Dykes. We now have a local company, Hayden Group, who will be looking to do the work for us to invest in this site to replace the 20 accommodation units to more affordable, better heated, better insulated units. That comes with 4 million of Scottish Government Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Fund support. That's about 60% of the actual bill, with the site now part of the Housing Revenue account, paying rent to the council. This means that the Housing Revenue account will pay for the rest of what is needed for the replacement of the units and the infrastructure there. So it's now for officers to take forward with Hayden and with the residents there how to take this forward with them. And I think that's a really good news story for our Housing Revenue account and looking after our tenants in Perth and Kinross, no matter the background or how they like to live their lives.
Thank you, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to echo some of your comments there. We do have an ambitious capital programme, which over the next 5 years amounts to in the region of £624 million. And we are benefiting from comparatively low interest rates against our borrowing, which is the result of prudent decisions made in the past, thankfully. In relation to that ambition, in terms of our capital programme, it's good to see the progress that's being made in a number of our important and significant capital projects, such as the Crossdale Link Road, Perth Museum, Perth High School and Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, for instance. Like you, Convener, I'm very much looking forward to the opening of Perth Museum in the near future, which will be, I think, a significant moment for the city of Perth and for the economy of Perth and Kinross. Can I just finally finish by thanking Stuart Mackenzie and his team for this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Rebick.
Thanks very much again, Convener. Just very briefly, I just want to reaffirm what our housing convener said about Double Dykes. Having been up several times since Councillor Barrett very kindly first took me up to meet residents 2 or 3 years ago. This work is absolutely crucial. It's really needed, and it's good to see it getting done. I just want to put on record my thanks to the housing team and, in fact, the housing convener sitting next to me for getting this work done. It's crucial. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, convener. Thanks very much for the offer of a separate briefing on the capital programme. I think that will be very helpful. Clearly, the residents of Perth and taxpayers of Perth and Kinross want us to invest in the, as you emphasised, the future, the infrastructure of Perth and Kinross for the benefit of the future. I do think that we need to take stock of the capital programme, because if I'm reading Appendix 1 correctly, or I think it's or a combination of Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, we're spending 140 odd million pounds on capital projects this year, but our actual recurring or our capital grant allocation from the Scottish Government is a little under 20 or a bit under 23 million pounds. So all of that extra investment that's being made is taking away from the revenue that would otherwise be available to service, to provide the services that our officers do, go above and beyond to provide to the residents of Perth and Kinross, and it's restricting our ability to provide and develop and expand those services on which so many people rely. So, as I say, thank you for the offer of the separate briefing on the capital budget and how the budgeting for that works. But I think that'll be useful in informing elected members going forward about the scale of the and affordability of the capital programme for the council.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Do we have any other comments? Okay, I'm going to ask the committee to agree the report. Are we agreed? And I do actually take the view, it is challenging. We are in difficult circumstances, but I think that investment can deliver so much for the people of Perth and Kinross, and you've got to view it not as wasteful expenditure. It is actual investment, an investment in the future of our people. I want to conclude. I think other opportunities are going to arise. So I'm not today going into be overly long, but I do think it's right to comment, as this is his last meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee, and prior to that, obviously, the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee. I really want to place on record my immense thanks to Stuart Mackenzie. He won't be at our next meeting in April, but I can't thank him enough, both in terms of being in an administration and also in opposition. I think there have been one or two times he could have seen me far enough. I think there have been one or two occasions where he has burnt the midnight oil, anticipating questions from my good self, and then I never asked the question, such as, but you got to keep officers on their toes. But seriously, I'm incredibly grateful to him for his counsel, his advice, for his help over the years. But the good news is he will be around at the time of the budget, and but I just wish Stuart all the very, very best going forward, and hopefully a bit further down the road he will have a role to play in other aspects of life in Perth and Perth and Kinross. Stuart, thank you very much.
Thank you, convener. I'm not going to say much because it's been a long day for many of you, and I've been here forever. And as you know, I like a story, so I've got anecdotes about everybody in this room. And I'm trying to find I think of a place I can actually express that. 3 thanks very quickly for myself. Firstly, to the convener and to Councillor Lane as leader of the council for your support, and previously to Councillor Duff and former Councillor Lyle for their support during my tenure as Section 85 officer. You all know how very personal this is to me. Perth is my home, and it's been a fantastic role and privilege to have had this opportunity. Second thank you is to the most important asset this council has, and it's not the bricks and mortar, it's the people, and the fantastic team that I've been privileged to work with for 30 years plus. And finally, I'm not going to lose my voice. Finally, a thank you to the council in its widest sense for the best career I could ever imagine having. Thank you.
The end of the meeting. Right. Thank you.